is a little bit of good news, at least I think so, when the people are coming together and they're deciding to disrupt power and disrupt capital. Now, a couple days ago, we did cover the recent protest in France. I told you there were two different ones. There were protests about the pension, and there were also protests against NATO. The general strike that is happening in France, some are referring to it as a national strike. Some are referring to it as a general strike, whatever. Long story short, they have decided to shut things down. And by they, I mean the workers. And President Macron is not happy about that, but there's not that much he can do. Check this out. Now, this is coming from CNN. I was actually surprised that they even talked about this. It says French airports, schools, and oil refineries hit by national strike over pension age increase. Check out the picture, guys. The trash is piling up just a block down the street from the Eiffel Tower. French transport networks, oil refineries, and schools were hit by widespread disruption Thursday as workers staged a national strike to protest an increase in the retirement age that was pushed through the parliament without a vote. If you are not aware, basically President Macron did what we would call here an executive order and decided to make that decision. Now, from what I understand, the retirement age, he's trying to raise it from 62 to 64. So adding on 2 more years there, the people in France they're not going to have it. Like, they are not kidding around. So they've been protesting for the past couple of days. And this has now led to a general strike because he actually tried to prevent people from protesting. He actually implemented a rule that prevented gatherings. That did not stop the people. The people in France are like, no, we are not going to have an increased retirement age. Through sporadic demonstrations, those sporadic demonstrations had popped up in Paris and other cities after the French government forced the bill through last week. Thursday marked the first day of coordinated action since then. It is the 9th day of strikes since the bill was introduced in January. Only 2 of the 14 metro lines in Paris were operating a normal service. The RER train services, which run in the city and its suburbs, were severely reduced, and only half of high-speed TGV trains were working. The national strike has also affected air traffic, with 30% of flights impacted at Paris Orly Airport. Unionized workers blockaded a major oil refinery in Normandy and another one in Fos-sur-Mer in the south of France, according to a government spokesperson. So I have some clips to show you because I just want you to see this in action for yourself. Now, what you have to understand is that President Macron, he actually faced a no confidence vote. Basically, what that means is it's a vote that says that if it passes, that basically the person that is holding office at that point in time is not fit to serve. He was actually able to beat that. And I think that actually made the people even more angry. And they are angry, and they have every right to be. I want to show you this clip here, which says, again, Macron survives no confidence vote, making new French pension plan law. Listen to this.
Tonight, more anger in the streets of Paris after French President Emmanuel Macron's government survived a crucial and close no-confidence vote in Parliament.
La majorité requise n'étant pas atteinte, la motion de censure n'est pas adoptée.
Making his signature pension plan, which increases the retirement age for most workers from 62 to 64, law. Reigniting the fury of protesters who have set fires and clashed with police for more than a week. Macron used what French lawmakers call the nuclear option, a constitutional maneuver allowing him to force through a bill without a full parliamentary vote. Opposition.
So yeah, like here we would refer to that as like an executive order.
Lawmakers expressing their frustration.
Depuis ce jeudi et le passage en force avec le 49.3 ne s'arrêteront pas parce que cette motion de censure a été si petitement battue à 9 petites voix. Rien n'a été réglé dans le pays et le pays continue à s'enfoncer dans une crise politique que Macron a lui-même créée.
Macron was being squeezed by both a coalition of centrist and left-wing parties and also the far-right National Rally. Both debated no-confidence motions to defeat his signature pension plan and dissolve his cabinet. The new plan chipping away at a cornerstone of the French social pact and inciting the most intense political upheaval since his re-election last year. Upset protesters vowing to continue their impassioned demonstration.
We've got a president that says definitely deaf to what the French people says to him.
Earlier today, a waste.
I just wanted to say here, they have been protesting during the day, at night. This is like a 24-hour thing. This is not like a let's just go out and march for like an hour. And people need to really understand when we talk about protesting, or when I talk about protesting here in the United States, like it has to be continued. These have to like be ongoing protests. Like that's actually how those protests during the civil rights movement actually made some type of an impact. It wasn't just one march. They did these actions multiple times for years, actually. So you have to understand, like, you have to continue direct action.
Plant in a Paris suburb was brought to a standstill. Workers and union leaders pleading with the president to withdraw the plan.
Une très large majorité est contre sa régression sociale, là, cette réforme des retraites. Et il faut maintenant qu'il entende les salariés et le peuple de France. Il faut retirer ce projet.
Echoes of the Yellow Vest movement, which forced the government to repeal a contested gas tax during his first term.
So these are the Yellow Vest guys, and this is the organization I was referring to before that actually, was able to get some progressive accomplishments in France, and they do not play around.
Macron has described the cost-cutting measure as necessary for France's economy to remain competitive and aligned with its European partners. Opponents say there's no threat of bankrupting the pension system and other considerations should be made. The police have been successful in dispersing many of the demonstrations that we've seen across the city of Paris, but we've been speaking with these demonstrators. They say they will be back. They
will be back. They are not done. They are not finished. And I'm actually going to show you a clip that actually shows you that what she was saying about the police being able to stop those demonstrations. I'm going to show you a more recent clip that actually says the opposite. There's more of them than there are of the police.
Just the start of many demonstrations to come.
Yes, they are not backing down. And I want people to see this because I want people to understand, like, they do not play around, like they are serious. And there are some, I would say, American like commentators who are making the claim that basically they shouldn't complain because it's only 2 years. But see, to them, it's not just only 2 years. It's their livelihood. And what you have to understand is that in Europe, they really care about things like this and they'll fight for it. When I lived in Germany, like there was no such thing as like a 30-minute break or a 15-minute break like we have here in the United States. People would go on break for like 2 hours. Like 2 hours. There was no such thing as like you get 2 weeks of vacation a year. And some people don't even get that. They would get like months vacation. Like, so when you take something away from them that they feel is part of their livelihood, they don't play around with that. They will fight for it. Now, this whole event, this national strike that's happening in France is not just affecting those who live in France. It's also affecting those who visit France. And I'm trying not to laugh as I say this, because this clip that I'm going to show you is actually kind of funny in a sense. Now, for those who are visiting, Carol posted this on Twitter. This is what it's like landing in Paris for vacation right now. This is amazing. So here's someone who actually just came out from the airport. And I want to show you what's happening.
I landed in Paris to this. There are protesters everywhere, and there are no cars allowed in and out of the airport. My Uber driver was kind enough, and he came and picked me up, and we walked half a mile to his car, which is...
So the Uber driver, so here's the thing, guys, the Uber driver had to come and pick her up. He actually had to park his car, walk to the airport to help her bring her stuff to his car, which she said was actually like a half mile away from the airport. He couldn't even come pick her up exactly like right outside the airport because of everything that's going on.
Parked on the highway along with everybody else. There's garbage everywhere in the city, and the designer stores are boarding up their windows. It's a scary scene over here, and there's cops everywhere.
Now I want to look at the garbage part again. I want to show you.
I landed in Paris to his car, which is parked on the highway along with everybody else.
Look at that. See how all the garbage is piling up? Because again, like the garbage men they're on strike. So there's no one to pick up the trash. The airports are pretty empty. The Uber drivers can't even pick people up at the airports. There's no taxi drivers apparently at the airports. This is what a general strike looks like. They shut down pretty much most of the employment at the airports. The trains have been pretty much shut down. We went over that. And then on top of that, they're not picking up the trash. And I want to say something to be very clear. When you have trash like this pile up for days, the city will start to smell. Imagine if it was summer and it was hot outside. That would be pretty gross, huh? But this is what it can happen when you realize that you, the worker, have the power.
There's garbage everywhere in the city, and the designer stores are boarding up their windows.
So they're already starting to board up the windows because they've already seen what has been happening and what could continue to happen. Now, I just want to give a little bit of encouragement for people here is to like, imagine if the garbage men and women, imagine if the taxi drivers, imagine if, at least here in Boston, imagine if those that work for the T, the ones who drive like the subways and the buses, all of them got together and said, you know what, we're going on strike. Then you also have the Amtrak workers go on strike. You have the port workers on the West Coast go on strike. You have the truckers go on strike. That's your general strike, guys. That's your general strike. Yeah, you can boycott Amazon. You can do those things. But a general strike is even more effective. And that's what I want people to understand. Now, I have another clip here I want to show you of the protest as well. Check this out.
French unions held more strikes against President Emmanuel Macron's reform of the country's pension system a day after he went on television to insist he won't back down. Let's bring in Bloomberg's Caroline Conan in Paris. Caroline, Macron at one point comparing this to the Capitol riots. Is that a fair comparison? Have these strikes turned violent?
When you look at what happened on Thursday in Paris, especially, in fact, the streets are definitely not calming down against this pension reform. You had more than 1 million people protesting across the country.
So they had more than 1 million people protesting. When you have those types of numbers come out, you can make an impact.
According to the police, 3.5 million people, according to the main CGT union. So quite a big crowd out there. And it was actually more violent than usual on the sidelines with those so-called black blocs, these far left groups actually clashing with the police on several occasions, especially in Paris. And you had about 150 police officers injured with some being set on fire. In fact, the turnout at these protests had gone down recently over the past few weeks, but there are since the government actually survived this vote on no confidence on Monday, the turnout yesterday.
So I wanted to pause here and I wanted to show you the turnout at the French protest. So she's saying the turnout has gone down. Look at this, guys. In January 19th, it was 1.12 million, right? Let's go all the way over to March 23rd, which was yesterday, 1.1 million. 1.1 million. And to them, like, that's the turnout has decreased. So I want you to see those numbers. Million. And to them, that's a decrease. That's low to them. Oh, it's going down. Like, just imagine, oh, the numbers are going down, but they still have over 1 million people out there protesting.
Went back up more than 1 million, as you can see on this graphic. That's because obviously the fact that the government wanted to force this reform without a vote really angered the streets.
So is there any sign that the government might react differently this time?
So, as you mentioned, the President Emmanuel Macron appeared on national television on Wednesday. He tried to appease the tension, comparing these riots to the Capitol Hill riots in Washington a couple of years ago, but saying he would stick to his pension reform, that it was in the best interest of the nation. But he came out as arrogant out of this interview. He failed to convince 70% of the French who...
Okay, this piece is important. Macron's interview on French TV, he failed to convince 70% of the people. They are not convinced that this is the way to go. So right now he's acting against the will of the majority of the people.
Actually felt despised, who thought they didn't listen to the streets. So the strikes are likely to continue. Already you see some refineries in Normandy near Lyon being disrupted. Also the kerosene deliveries to some Paris airports. And in fact, we could even wonder if the visit of King Charles on Monday will go as normal, because obviously it would be a bit strange to show on national television King Charles having a state dinner in Versailles on one side and the protests and the garbage piling up in Paris on the other side. So we'll see how this goes.
So that piece there is important. I want to go ahead and get to Eric, if you can bring up the next clip. They did reference King Charles there. So apparently King Charles was actually supposed to visit Paris. That has been put on pause because of everything that's happening there. So you can imagine the king showing up there and there's just loads of garbage everywhere and him just looking at Macron and saying, like, what is this rubbish? Like, what is this? Like, what happened to your city? Like, this place is out of control. Like, what are you doing? What's going on? But it does appear he is going to continue to make his trip to Germany, just so not so much to France. And then there's questions whether or not this can actually even spread to Germany as well. And here they're going to talk a little bit about that, about King Charles' visit and why that is no longer happening, at least for now.
Good afternoon. King Charles's state visit to France this weekend has been postponed. It comes after anti-government protests in the country over plans to raise the retirement age erupted in violence again last night. The king had been due to arrive in France this Sunday. It would have been the first state visit of his reign, but it's now been cancelled at the request of the French government. Well, confirming the news, a UK government spokesperson said the King and Queen Consort's state visit to France has been postponed. This decision was taken with the consent of all parties after the President of France asked the British government to postpone the visit. A very similar statement as well from Buckingham Palace, which reads, the King and the Queen Consort's state visit to France has been postponed. Their Majesties greatly look forward to the opportunity to visit France as soon as dates can be found.
You know, it's one of those things where it's like, there are those moments when you know that, like, there may be things about your family that you only want your family to see, right? Like, everybody has like a crazy uncle or a crazy cousin or something like that, right? And it's like everyone in the family knows that, right? And you may see them get a little out of control or something like that. But you don't want other people to see that. This is what's happening right now. It's like President Macron is like, yeah, I know people here can get a little bit lit and they can get a little fiery when things don't go their way. And it's like, he knows that. And the French people know that, but he doesn't want someone else from the outside to come in and witness that. That's what this is like. We'll go on a little bit more here.
And our royal correspondent, Laura Bundock, is with me. Hello there to you, Laura. This would have been the phone call that President Macron didn't want to have to make.
And it's the phone call that the king wouldn't have wanted to receive either, I think. This was a huge moment for both men, really, but particularly, I think, for the king, because it was to be his first state visit. He's visited France officially as Prince of Wales 35 times, but never as monarch. So a lot was being played into this meeting. It was seen as significant for a number of reasons, because I think if you look at where Britain is now, if you look at the amount of division, the disputes following Brexit, this meeting was seen as a reconciliation point, if you like, reaffirming the Anglo-French relationships after so much frostiness between them. That's seen as thawing away. The Windsor Framework now sort of signed and sealed. This was the two countries looking forward, we're told, a celebration of the relationship between them. But I think we heard very early on, we got a sense yesterday, things were going wrong.
This was the clip I really wanted you to see. You see this image? Look at all that trash. Look at it. Mm-hmm.
The word Versailles was taken out of the official information about this trip.
Seen as antagonistic to the striking.
Totally, a real provocation, the wrong place to be seen having lavish banquets. And that's where this state banquet was meant to.
She said lavish banquets. So again, the people are protesting for their own rights here. Okay. He's basically he's forcing them basically to work longer or later in life. And she goes on to say, yes, they won't be able to have their lavish banquet. Do you guys see the class divide? Oh, no, it wouldn't be good for them to have a lavish banquet with all the trash on the street and people fighting.
To be happening. So that was taken away. And then I think as the situation in France escalated, the nervousness, the twitchiness ramped up to a whole new level, culminating today with the cancellation of the French leg of this state visit.
The German leg still going
ahead. Still going ahead. Have a listen now to Lord Ricketts, who's the former British ambassador to France. Interesting what he has to say.
They couldn't, for example, do the kind of walkabouts with crowds that the king enjoys so much. What was the point of doing it, really? Doing a state
oh, boo-hoo. They can't do their walkabouts. They can't do something that the king likes to do so much.
Visit where the president himself is subject to enormous criticism, can't really appear in public in any safety. That's not a good circumstance to do a state visit in.
These are live pictures, Laura. This is President Macron. He's speaking in Brussels, unrelated to what we're talking about now. But as far as we know, that trip will not go ahead until things calm down.
Absolutely. We know that he had this phone call earlier on with the king. It is a moment of embarrassment for him, but I think they had to assess what is worse, cancelling now with just 2 days to go, or letting this trip go ahead and face a humiliation of it being.
It's a bit of an embarrassment for him because people got to see his crazy uncles and cousins. That's why he's embarrassed.
Completely overshadowed and dominated by protesters who would have really taken this moment and played it to their absolute advantage. So bad news for Macron and bad news for the king. And as I say, this is not what Buckingham Palace would have wanted. These trips are planned and planned and planned to the tiniest of details. But
Buckingham Palace doesn't get to decide what happens in someone else's country when they go to visit. Yeah. She's like, this isn't what Buckingham Palace would have wanted, but like, it's not their country. They don't really get to decide what happens there.
Will happen. So we don't know when, and we don't know when the French trip's being postponed until, but we're assuming the Germany trip, which was meant to start on Wednesday in Berlin, will go ahead, ending in Hamburg on Friday. One thing I love about this.
There goes McDonald's.
It's the fact that this is a dispute about raising the pension age to 64. The king is 74 and still working full time. I don't
know. Listen to what she says here. See, they're laughing about the retirement age. Listen to what they say. Let me put the captions on for this one. Listen to this.
Wednesday in Berlin will go ahead, ending in Hamburg on Friday. One thing I love about this is the fact that this is a dispute about raising the pension age to 64. The king is 74 and still working full time. I don't know if that was mentioned, but I think he had.
The king is 74 and still working full time. Working how? What does he do? What does he do? King Charles comes from a family of inherited generational wealth and privilege. So let's not pretend that what King Charles does is anything close to what those employees working at McDonald's, the garbage men, anything close to what they do for a living. Let's remember that King Charles lives in Buckingham Palace, and that is actually the citizens' taxes that pay for his bills in Buckingham Palace. Let's all remember that. Let's all remember that the Queen at one point had a yacht that the citizens were paying for that she didn't want to part ways with. And it was finally pushed away from her, where they said, no, we're entering a new time. And the people kind of feel like it's kind of showboaty for you to have this yacht that the people are paying for. It's a bit too much. She made a big deal about it. She didn't want to let go of it. See, I know a lot about the royal family. She didn't want to let go of it. It was a boo-hoo moment for her. I've had so many wonderful times on that yacht, yes, that you did not pay for. So the fact that the commentators in this segment are sitting here and they are pretending like King Charles is just some working class Joe Schmo who's still working like he's 74, his work is not hard. His work is not taxing. His work does not affect his physical strength. Like he's not coming home from work at night with a bad back or with legs that hurt. She made it sound like he's still out here like waiting tables or something and he's 74 years old. What do they do besides steal resources and steal culture from other people's countries? Don't let me get into that. Don't let me go there. Jesus. But there's more. Because, you know, Professor Richard Wolff's family is from France. Originally, that's where they're from. And he did have something to say about what is happening right now in France in reference to capitalism. And I think everyone needs to pay close attention to this.
The conditions of modern French capitalism are such that the business community, the conservatives, the wealthy, keep pushing whoever is in power to try to get this done. And the reasoning for that is simple. They don't want to pay the taxes that are part of how this gets funded. And so to save themselves having to pay taxes, this is a small minority of the French, they want to deprive the majority of the French of the pension they've won the right to retire at age 62. So you're going to people who are already exhausted at the end of a life of working like that, and you're going to take away 2 of the few years they have in retirement? No, you're not. Here's the second argument. France has prided itself in recent decades on raising worker productivity. What a nice phrase. You know what it means? It means you get more out of a worker per hour than you used to. You've raised labor productivity. Now, you've done that in a number of ways. You have added machinery. You have improved the machinery. You now have AI. You have robotics. You have computers, all kinds of things. But you've also made workers work harder, work faster, etc. And that is wear and tear on the bodies and minds of people.
And that's exactly the point that I want to drive home when they talk about King Charles. They make it seem like he's doing work that is doing that type of, causing that type of stress to his body. He's not. Like, it's not like he's doing like this physical job.
You have made them work harder, but you haven't kept up in terms of what it means for the mental and physical capabilities. Therefore, you owe the working class some sort of adjustment to what you have pressured them to do. But you're not giving them more retirement as an offset. You're not giving them earlier retirement as an offset, which would make sense if you cared about the mass of your people. You want to take away 2 years of the retirement that they can look forward to enjoying. Don't call it a reform. You're depriving your working class of 2 years of retirement. That's what
2 years of their life. And honestly, like, I think it's ridiculous that people have to work that long. I really do. By that time, you should be able to just relax and enjoy the rest of your life. You should be having to like break your back at that age. But the thing is, the reality is, at least a lot of Americans do have to do that in this country. I know people have been working till like they're in their 80s. Like, it's ridiculous. But the French there, they are not trying to put up with this. And mainstream media, you know, they don't really want to talk about this. And when they do, they want to make it seem like the protesters are being ridiculous because they don't want Americans to start to get ideas.
you're asking for. Take away 2 years of whatever you can enjoy in the way of a retired life. But I stress these are arguments. In France, the unions long ago learned a lesson not all that well learned in many other countries, that the arguments are never what win the case. They're important, they're worth developing, they're worth publicizing, and the French are doing all of that. But you've got to get the bodies out on the street. And that's why the unions declared, all 7 or 8 of the different federations of unions in France agreed together, cooperating to have a general strike.
And see, this is the part that is very important. And that is very key, I think. You have different sectors of the workforce coming together and saying, let's all go on strike at the same time. And that's how you create a general strike. And those things can be very much effective. The problem is that we seem to have here in the United States is that a lot of people here are out for their self. They only want to look out for their union, or they only want to look out for their union supervisor or their sector of the workforce. And they don't really care what's happening across the street when those workers may be dealing with the same issues. They're not thinking that way. And that is why something like Workers Strike Back, which Shama Sawant and Socialist Alternative have started, is very, very important, because they realize that when Chris Smalls helped the Amazon workers at the warehouse go on strike, they realized that, you know what? They need some help. They realized that all of these different companies where these employees were going on strike like a year and a half ago, they realized it would be even more effective if they all came together. And that's why you have something like that has been created. And one of their first goals is to organize Amazon warehouses across the United States. This is not something that Chris Smalls can do by himself. He needs some help. So you have to educate. And then Americans really have to deprogram our minds. We really have to get out of this mindset that is just about what we want, what we need, and ignoring our neighbor's needs. We very much have like this individual mindset in this country. It's all about me, 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 instead of we. And if we start thinking more in reference to we instead of me, I think we can get a lot more done.
A general strike. They've been planning it for weeks, scheduled for the 7th of March. That strike is underway already because different unions start at different points. And so it's sort of a stretched out event, because you're talking about millions of people.
Yep.
It will be not at all surprising if there's more than 1 million on any given day not working, staying at home, and or in the streets. But the unions in France know that to win this fight, they need to be allied. They have to have allies. And the allies are 2 things in France that are worth our looking at and understanding. First, they ally with social movements against racism, movements against the persecution of immigrants.
This is why when people ask about the demands that Shama Sawant has for Workers' Strike Back, this is why one of the demands is against racism and oppression, because she obviously paid attention to what the Yellow Vest did and the other unions have done in places like France. They came together on the worker issues, and then they decided to come together on actual social movements as well. So now you're a double threat. Let's go on.
Movements, you fill in the blank. The unions work with them. They go out and support them in exchange for them supporting the unions. And since everyone has an interest, everyone in the working class, the vast majority of France, has an interest in holding on to the pensions they fought for and won, this is an alliance that can be built. A bit more interesting in the French context is the fact there's a third player in this alliance: the unions, the social movements, and the left-wing political parties.
And that's the piece that we are missing here in the United States. So when people ask us, why do you guys get so upset with people like AOC and Cori Bush and the rest of them? Because they are the missing piece. If we don't have those politicians who said they would fight for those issues, who some of them did fight for those issues before they became politicians, if we don't have that voice, that fighter in DC, that actually can hurt the movement. Now, that's not to say that we still can't make it happen. We can make it happen, but it's even more powerful and meaningful when you have people in Congress that have your back with your movement on the outside. France does this. The UK does this. Germany does this. This is the difference, people. I talked to Claire Daly about this not too long ago when she said that's the difference. The politicians that they have, the left wing politicians that they have in the EU that represent them, they are there and down for the fight for the social movements and the worker movements. So they have someone that has that power and that voice to represent them in the political space while they do the work outside the political space. But then that politician is also helping them on the outside as well. This is very crucial for people to understand. You are now a triple threat.
That's right. The unified left-wing political parties who contested in the race and whose candidate, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, came a couple of percentage points behind Mr. Macron. That's all. Not a big difference. They have also mobilized to support and participate in this general strike. It's a little bit like the next phase of what was called the Yellow Vest movement a couple of years ago.
And that's the Yellow Vest right behind him. If you guys are wondering what this is, that's one of the Yellow Vests. Liberté, Égalité, Égalité, Fraternité, Solidarité. That's the Yellow Vest.
Movement of enormous power and strength, which overturned initiatives by Mr. Macron and only came to an end because of COVID and all that it implied for people getting together and marching down the street.
Yep.
So all of these forces are getting together. And unlike Annalena Baerbock in Germany, the Greens in France are participating in all of this.
Oh, that was kind of a woo. That was kind of a low blow. Because the Green Party in Germany has completely caved. They've completely caved. So he even have the Green Party participating as well. If you want to see this full video, the name of this video is called A General Strike in France: 4 Challenges to Capitalism with Richard Wolff. Please watch the rest of this video, you guys. I think this is very important, very crucial for people to understand that this is how they're doing it. This is actually how they are able to have that general strike. I'm going to go to some of the comments in the chat. SG says more than 10 million marched for George Floyd. This is true. Apollo Creed's young nephew. Y'all remember when Macron got slapped a couple of years ago? They do not F around over there. I remember that. Oh, God. I should have tried to find that video. I might try to find that video. That one was funny. The Oracle says all this capitalist extraction and exploitation without regards to the labor that makes it all possible. 100%. Thank you for the super chat. Larez, strikes in 30s made FDR pass Social Security. Strikes needed again. Yes. Thank you for the super chat, AJF. I'm so impressed of how the French people have more class and solidarity activity than other democracies in the West. Hey, Americans, it's about class. That's right. See how they can all come together over the economic issues? I'll take the comments on Rockfin. All righty. Thank you so much for the comment on Rockfin Dave. Every single mainstream report I've seen in media available in US stream/TV have made fun of or put down the protests and not covered them at all fully or honestly. Yep. They're just making the protesters look like crazy people. That's what they're doing. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin Roger. American commentators that say it's only 2 years, fine, then make the retirement age 63. In the waning days of when Bobby was set to leave New Edition, he was not putting up with wearing sweaters, looking yuppie and bubblegum. The rest of the group said, come on, Bobby, just wear it already. Bobby was not having it. He was like, we street dudes from Roxbury, Boston. France is Bobby. We in the US are other members of the group. Okay, he's talking about the R&B group New Edition. So he's saying that those of us in the US, you guys, we're the rest of New Edition, and France is Bobby Brown. So France decided, to go on their own. That's what that's about.